Hello. In my mind, I keep thinking I should read this fairy tale. So I'm going to read this fairy tale I wrote a long time ago called Alethia. I have been recovering. Oh, and you know what? That's also the first... See, I haven't read this in a long time, so I don't know what we're in for. Just my mind just keeps saying, you should do this. And so I'm doing it. But the first words are, I have been. So it's kind of fun. Ooh. And it ends in this forest. Well, this is what I've written, typed up so far. The rest of it is all on like handwritten notes that I can piece together later so that we can see how the story ends. Let's just say somebody drowns, okay? I will say that. I have been plucked from the garden of earth, only to be placed inside a lonely vase in someone's home. I should have dried by now. I should have lost all my petals. I have lived in this isolated chamber of glass where others can see me and marvel at my immortality. All I can do is watch them marvel. What will come of all this? I ponder this question every sleepless minute and even continue so in my exhaustion-induced dreamscape. I once had many cracks in my heart, not from harsh words or active punishments, for I am purposely capable of understanding and processing such things through art. Rather, the only true weakness I have found is in the passive punishment of silence. Silence has almost broken me, yet here I am, trapped in a noiseless vase, where no one can hear me laugh, scream, sing, or cry. I can hear me. All I can hear is me. So naturally, I feel the void of the silenced faces that watch me with what I imagine to be the dialogue concerning the reason of which I have been plucked so vulgarly. There isn't a person, place, thing, situation, or emotion that I don't romanticize. Some may call this a weakness of naivete, but is it not a true strength to be able to create beauty and love within whatever is thrown one's way? So irregardless, I am a romantic in every genre of my observant life. In order to keep my sanity, I've learned that it is imperative that I allow myself to think that I am an expert, at least in interpreting people's nonverbal communication. In my younger years, each day I would have anywhere between 5 to 13 completely separate existential crises. That almost made me lose a few of my petals, so I adapted by using my imagination to decide the reality that I lived in. Those realities never stayed for more than a few weeks, because one of my many onlookers would always eventually get me to question that reality, causing another bout of sequential existential crises. I adapted by learning to use those breakdowns to search for new fragments for me to be creative within the construction of my reality. I've done this so many times that my eyes, through which I perceive all that resides outside of me, have become glazed with a vibrantly colorful lens that resembles an enchanting stained glass mosaic in the walls of a long-forgotten palace of worship, despite the fact that the vase I am in is made of clear glass. These days I no longer find myself in existential crisis at the same grandiosity or frequency. Rather, I seem to live in constant existential state of where I readily change the colors of the kaleidoscope contact lenses I've grown to cherish so fondly. I do so by my own volition in whatever fashion pleases me best. The result of who this makes me will always be transparent for all my onlookers, yet I may never get to know it for myself. Although I can be seen transparently, my community has too developed their own pair of glasses, and a lens of which they are passive-aggressively forced to wear. I'm afraid, subsequently, I misinterpreted. That is what has made me this metaphorical flower trapped inside this metaphorical glass in the first place. My whole life I've been encapsulated by people who lived in terror of that which they could not comprehend or fit into a stereotyped box. This manifested as a bubble-type community that accidentally or not worked together to criticize and disgrace all things, thoughts, or people that were out of their perception of what is ordinarily understandable. I believe that everyone is out of the ordinary in their own right, But the people of my village have those intricate facets of themselves subconsciously suppressed. My village was pleasant and picturesque on the surface, but with so many rules and behavioral expectations, there only existed that which surfaced. There was no way to experience death amongst one another, and they were all seriously deprived of discovery, which could only come from exploration of the self, each other, and the larger world that we all sat upon. Every member of the community had no apparent outward reason to be anything other than happy, and a strange sense of tension with which sprout and amongst the decorative shrubbery within the village limits of that which is essence smelt of oh oh a strange tension sprout in amongst the decorative shrubbery within the village limits. The essence smelt of rotting yolk as to caution any villagers against any misstep that would crack the egg in their shells that they all walked upon. I never knew my father because my mother got amnesia when I was 2. But I have a memory of him giving me a small gilded dragon figurine, which I wear around my neck under my garments. I hide it because when I was younger, and I showed it off to my peers, the adults of my community tried to take it away from me, to be smashed as punishment for daring to wear something so shiny and attention-calling and jealousy-inducing. My mother's oldest memory is awakening with her 2-year-old child on a riverbed, not knowing her own name, yet still remembering her child's name. She took my hand and played in the river with me following the riverbed to the nearest town who took us in. Although my mother loved me, and I the same, she didn't have much of an identity, and our conversations were only ever wondering aloud about the mystery of the path. I yearned to seek answers to those questions, but I was forbidden to do so by my mother's fear of the truth. Conversing with my mother felt tedious due to the same constant questions and denied access to find the answers. I was starving for real connection and conversation. Since my mother had to work for our survival, I spent most of my early years in complete emotional, physical, and mental isolation. This provided me with a mentality of which I've grown to be deeply thankful for, although I once thought it as the greatest all-encompassing burden for any human to bear. This hypnotically programmed mindset was consciously downloaded within my sponge-like brain at the age of 7. Spending that much time alone during those formative years allowed me the freedom from thinking to care what anyone thought of my actions, or of the typical pressure to conform my essence into something that would be easily categorized. The books I turned to for company sparked my curiosity about the intricacies of human behavior. So when I began schooling, I observed the world and its inhabitants as if they were an incredible research opportunity. This gave me a very experimental type approach to my outer world, which thankfully has never left me. I constantly did absurd things just to see how dynamics would change and to see people's reactions to behaviors that I had yet to come across in my studies of human nature. My intentions were pure. I wanted to promote unconditional love and thereby radical acceptance of innocent obscurities from the behaviors that I perceived to be pedestrian to the typical human presentation of oneself. I was essentially attempting to normalize individuality and the authenticity attached to that concept when facing the utterly soul-crushing discovery of social norms. Once I observed the patterns of what was praised and what was shamed within characteristics others performed for each other, I found a sense of boredom in the repetitive nature of the human condition. When one represents themselves in a manner that affirms what is already known by others within their collective conscious reality, they receive praise, or at least acceptance. When one acts in ways that confront that collective consciousness and what it knows to be true, they are met with fear-based actions of shame, belittlement, and at its most extreme, avoidance. This subsequently leads to social isolation for those that appear confronting. At birth, no one had assigned me any sort of purpose in this world, nor had anyone forced me into any type of pre-described destiny or pre-described role in society. So I decided around the age of 7 to be a revolutionist. My revolution was to promote the love and appreciation of diversity in thought and expression. This mission gave me some pretty unbridled confidence in the art of not giving a single fuck if people thought I was crazy or weird. I held on to that while going about my days, wearing playfully shocking outfit combinations. People thought I was bonkers, and some were attracted to that energy because I was simply putting smiles on their faces through blatant absurdity. Those were my friends, and back then I had many. My best friend was a girl that took the time to uncover that underneath my wackiness there was a great driving force of emotional depth and great amounts of intellectual substance. The way I presented myself attracted plenty of negative attention as well. Many people thought that I was really annoying, but I understood that it was only because they admired my confidence and sense of freedom. Their admiration subconsciously manifested as jealousy due to their misconceived perception that they could not have my same confidence and freedom. These types of reactions came from those that had the subconscious programming that it is not safe to exhibit the traits that they admired in me, so they were scared of me. My mere existence contradicted their reality and core beliefs, so they would belittle me to prove that their subconscious realities were indeed true. The only thing the only thing I learned the only thing I learned from my schooling was to stop asking questions and to wear a mask of pleasant innocence. When I turned 14, everything changed, because to my classmates' surprise, I was removed from school and placed as the village record keeper's assistant. A prestigious position. I had an unquenchable creative thirst, something my elders supposed was coded in my DNA, while they whispered among themselves and made up tragedies regarding the origin and identity of my father and helplessly stupid mother. It was gossip, slander, and cruel judgment from those who I was supposed to assume as my guides and teachers. I was known as the girl with a few screws loose, but I didn't realize that having that categorization also led people to assume that I had only had those characteristics because I was too dumb to know otherwise. I represented the truth found in their phrase, ignorance is bliss, to them. After seeing that I was in no way, shape, or form an ignorant person, people started to socially distance themselves from me, or take every chance they could at trying to make me feel stupid. My confidence was built on my intelligence, so this was very harmful to my psyche. So many of my friends and peers subconsciously could not handle my freedom of expression anymore because it was in conjunction with my intelligence, which meant that I fully understood the effect that I had on others. I fully understood the way that we are taught the world works. They wrote me off as too dumb to understand the things that I was doing as me being a ditzy, unaware girl. So they were able to laugh along and enjoy our friendships. This was confronting to their subconscious because they feared that I was free from the pressure to conform. They only felt that it was still safe for them to engage in my reality because they assumed that I was overcompensating for my fear of their superior intelligence and therefore didn't have to feel inadequate or jealous. Once people realized that we weren't in a mutual relationship of fear manifesting as superiority complexes, the realities were shaken when it came to their interactions with me. They found safety in feeling like they were better than me in some way. And so they had this concept confronted, like it w- so when they had this concept confronted, it was like everyone I associated with consciously agreed to straight up gaslight me into doubting my own intelligence. This led me to doubt everything else about myself too, leaving me in a state of not knowing if I could trust any of my thoughts about myself. I lived in fear with the parts of my identity that I still trusted, worried that other people would get to me and get me to question those things as well. I stopped being completely authentic. I lost sight of who I was outside of my religion and responsibilities. I was torn between showing up authentically or developing a facade as a mask for social acceptance. On one hand, I wanted to be myself fully and not care what other people thought, but the stakes were raised because I was facing my biggest fear of total isolation. I wasn't ready to face that fear, and so I caved. I made a plan that I wouldn't allow myself to be totally authentic, that I wouldn't share certain parts of myself, but rather keep quiet about my intelligence and wait until I had an opportunity to take my mom and leave this village. I could not truly deny my yearn for the calling deep inside. I became known as the next record keeper in training for my village, and in the secret cover of the midnight sky I burned candles as I wrote my own made-up stories to answer the nagging questions concerning mystical truths and soul-penetrating connections. One fateful day, an elder by the name of Cynthia Blue noticed ink on my hands as I was picking my mother flowers wearing yesterday's clothes in the wee early hours of the morning. Cynthia Blue must have had a brain aneurysm in this moment, because she broke nearly 11 rules herself, waking up the whole village with the booming sound of her unprecedented, unfiltered rage towards me. That was the breaking point for both of us. I quickly returned home and gave my mother the violet flowers I had picked. They were her favorite forget-me-nots. I announced with teary eyes that I was leaving to find adventure, answers, and a new home for us. It seemed obvious to my mother that I wasn't asking permission, so she helped me pack a knapsack and embraced me tightly while whispering to me her desperate wish was that I would not forget about her, as we both held back sobs. I walked out the door optimistic in my embarking endeavors to redefine my reality, gain true stability, and experience eternal connection in my quest for the deep, all-encompassing love that would hopefully result from my newfound freedom to pursue knowledge and authenticity. I walked back along the riverbed my mother and I tread long ago in the direction from whence we came. My mother told me that we woke on the shore about 70 steps beyond the fork where the river split into two. I approached the fork in the river as the sun was setting, took a deep breath, and started to count to 70. On the final step, I fell to my knees on the ground of my mother and I's rebirth and cried out to the heavens in the mourning of our loss of personhood in history. For the first time in my life, I thrashed my body and I moaned my pain audibly for all of creation to hear if they so pleased. I finally released the cork from my bottled-up concoction of isolation, desperation, and lividity which had been fermenting so long it exploded and rushed into the sand of the riverbed, which seemed eager to absorb my grievances. Exhausted, I lay cradle in fetal position and stayed emotionless for 56 hours. I awoke surprisingly warm next to a large furry body. A beautiful white horse cradled me inside the cave of a forest. I learned through telepathy that this horse's name was Ruby, and that she was indeed a unicorn. Ruby had dragged me into this cave in order to shelter me and keep me safe. She kept me alive by sponge bathing me with her tongue to keep me hydrated. Ruby told me that I had to stay centered in this moment, and that my purpose was not to fall into blind rage, which was all too common for people with the blood markers that I apparently had. I told Ruby about the mystery of my genetic heritage, and she reminded me that not everything that is a mystery is dark. The mystical realms are of light and love. They are not deceptive, nor can they be manipulated for bad. Your ancestral healing that needs to be done is to bring forth the power of believing in love and its unconditional power to create miracles and magic. Bring back love magic. Transmute love over everything in your soul's lineage. That is where you are in your sleep. You are saving the world by transmuting the down into up. You are making your lineage remember that what they forgot and what they made out as foolish, that love is truly the purest form of magic. Unashamed in doing your best to pull that in and understand it. There is no running and chasing. There is free will, but you prove that ties to your highest self cannot be severed. That will never be the choice as long as you've begun taking dark into light. You come from a long line of people too scared or beaten into hiding their light and true selves. People that create isolation and alienation for being their magical loving selves and getting hurt in the result, always seeing it in their downfall. But you will break that chain. It is your rise, it is their rise, it is our rise. It is the humanity's rise. This is the forgotten truth. That love is believing in magic wholeheartedly and unashamedly strong in the world. Love is shouting your love and displaying your magic for the world to see, to expect to receive, and to see proof of your beliefs in the world. That is what makes you a magnet. Ruby telepathically communicates to me as I eat the forged food, and Ruby tells me all about my warrior ancestral programming / trauma that is embedded in my genetic makeup. Ruby could tell this by the scent of my dried blood crusted over a paper cut on my thumb. Ruby offered to take me to a place where I can bathe and have a proper meal. So, as we rode through the trees, Ruby told me all about the forest.